I'm Michael Redmond, professional 9-dan Go player. In this video, I'm going to talk about the one-space corner enclosure and white's attachment against it. And in this video, I will focus most on black's hane on top. So when white plays an attachment like this, in this case and in general, black will have 4 choices of moves stemming from this black stone. So in order to defend that black stone, black could play an extension down, which would be a solid move, or an extension up, which would also be a solid move. So these would be very strong as defensive moves, but when black wants to attack, black has to play a diagonal move, curling around white stone, playing underneath, or playing above. So in a separate video, I talked about this move, and white covered on the 3rd line. There's a fight involved with that also, and I talked about it in a different video, which will be, there will be a link somewhere up there and a link in the comments. In this video, I will mainly talk about the upper hane. Both of these moves, the extensions, are not that challenging for white, because if you don't really know what to do with this, you can leave it for the time being. In this case, it would be perfectly okay for white to extend down and play some kind of extension. And white has gotten a base on the upper side here in this area. Whereas black started with a corner enclosure, really black started with this territory and has not really gained very much, so it's a slight advantage for white, I believe. Always depending on the board position. So I'm suggesting that black is going to play one of these strong moves locally, starting with a 2-to-1 advantage and it being black's move. It makes sense that black would want to play strongly like this. The only shape that white has against this is to play a hane against it. If white, for instance, pulls back, this exchange that black has played here, the hane on top and white just pulling back, this exchange is giving black a great advantage in this direction, much more control over the right side. Whereas white stones, if black gets to play a pincer somewhere around here, they will be very heavy. Even if white plays first, for instance, this would just increase black's hold on the right side. So actually, although white's position is also improving, black's position is improving even more. You have to remember also that the side is open here. White's not getting very much territory either. Otherwise, if white extends immediately, then black can push here. You can see again that black is getting a lot of potential towards the right side of the board, and white does not have that great of shape. So white will play the hane here, and black will usually play the connection here. This is the strongest move. If black covers here, which is maybe what I would call the 2nd best move, white will cut once and extend. And the fact that white got this one cut in is that much more trouble for black. For instance, if black takes it like this, then white does have a better shape with this move to look forward to when white is making a territory in this area. So this would be passable for white. This would be good enough. I think the best move for black is to connect here. I will be discussing some other options, like there's the option of cutting here and the option of playing an Atari first. But I would first like to go into the correct variation. When black plays here, it's almost mandatory that white extends. If white had played something like this, this would just allow black to play this very important point. And you can see black has a very nice, compared to the diagram I was talking about earlier, where this white stone is very much a thorn in black's side. It's troublesome. When we compare that with this variation, Black has a very nice shape here with all of the stones connected, and it's a beautiful shape. So this would be good for black. So white extends. Now black has two choices, but almost always I'm saying that black has the choice of playing here or covering in the corner. Covering in the corner would just allow white to, let's do it with stones. Covering in the corner would just allow white to extend here. This would be slightly better for white locally. So in most board positions it would be good for white. So now black takes the opportunity to play an Atari here. And this is where white will usually just dive into the corner. Black will capture one stone. White will capture a stone. And black will be forced to play an Atari here. The other move, like just leaving it, is bad because that would give white this huge point. Extending down is not very attractive because it doesn't have very much effect on the white group in the corner. So black will play an Atari here. And we have this position where white has established a group with Sente. White's kept the tempo. So white has gained a lot of territory here. But there is this troublesome ko. So it depends on how you feel about kos. If you completely dislike them, maybe you shouldn't have been playing this. But if you do like kos, it's going to be very interesting because white does not have a ko threat for this ko yet. So for instance, if white plays here, white's just going to lose the ko. And wherever white plays, black's just going to connect it. And the corner is not alive yet, so white would eventually have to put a stone in there to add a stone to the corner to make it alive. So the ko here is just not successful for white unless white has a very convincing ko threat for a while, for the time being, and maybe through most of the game white will not have the ko threat for this ko. But if white does get a good ko threat, then white can cut at this point. For black, black also does not have a very strong position because taking here and spending a lot of moves on this white group, it's still very difficult for black to kill it unconditionally. There are some ways, but they would involve having very bad Aji, having a weak shape on the outside. For instance, just connecting here does not kill the white group. White can still live with one more move in the corner. And so it's slightly premature, or you could even say wasteful, for black to be playing a lot of stones there immediately. And so quite often this is left throughout the middle game, and this ko is only resolved very much later in the game. So now I would like to look into that in a full board position. Here we have a full board position. This opening, which is fairly popular now, is by far the most likely opening for white's attachment at this point to happen. White often plays it when white has some ideas of invading the right part of the board without getting into too much trouble, without creating a target for black to attack. Or, on the other hand, maybe white is going to build a base on the upper side, using this attachment as a starting point. It all depends on how black answers. When black plays the hane on top, white will always play the hane underneath. And black connected in this game? This is the mainline variation. If black plays down here, that would give white the option of connecting here, and then white can live very easily in the corner. The problem with this for black is so many cutting points in black's position. It's not a very strong position there. So black took the one stone. It's very natural and logical. White also takes the stone. And the moment black plays this Atari, both sides do not have a good local move. Connecting here is something I didn't mention in the local diagram. It's pretty much out of the question. Like, you would never, a strong player would never think of connecting here. It's just too slow. White does want to have the option later to cut here, and if white wins the ko, it's a very efficient shape now. So there's no way that white would ever want to it would be very unlikely that white would want to connect in that point. White would prefer to have the option of playing a ko, and it doesn't really matter if black has to play 3 moves early in the game. Black might be able to play 3 moves and capture this group, but in the meanwhile white would be playing a lot of big moves elsewhere. Even if white loses the corner, it's a case of white being able to have a good position even so. So after this, white plays away, and black also plays away. In this game, I continued this way, trying to give the right side to black actually. I actually want black to surround this area. So the game could have continued with black connecting here, and white playing a double kakari. The point is that if black has spent a lot of stones to surround the right side here, this area, then in the case that white does get to, let's just play a few more moves. This is just hypothetical, but let's say that something like this happened. This would already be good for white. But if white does get to cut here later on, so say black plays here, in this board position, white still does not have a co-threat for this cut. Well, let's say maybe this one might be forcing. So when white does get that, you can see that the whole black area, which black has spent a lot of moves to create, it's all gone. So this would be an example of the ko being very effective for white. In order to make that effective, it's a good strategy for white to be attempting to give that side to black. So this makes sense for white to be heading into a variation where black seems to want to surround the right side. So actually in the game, black could continue with something from the corner, making a completely different variation. Here we have a position with the orientation of black's corner enclosure pointing in this direction. So it's slightly different from the examples I've been showing before. In this case, white again played the attachment. This is another actual game in which white played the attachment here. Slightly unusual example actually. Black played the hane on top. Once black does that, it's more or less forced for white to play this move. Black connected, white extended, black plays the tare. This is the mainline variation. And white got into this variation. Both sides capture a stone. The value for white now is that this stone in the upper right corner, which is potentially a weak stone, now white has the opportunity to add a stone to that and make it stronger. So in this position, the value of going into this variation for white is that white gets a tempo here. White gets sente to deal with that marked stone and has played both sides, you might say. White has played both in the lower right corner, also gets to add the stone here to that white move. This slide here has gone out of fad. You often see people playing the attachment. In this particular, and the attachment in the double hane, in this particular board position, the value of this side here is not so big. So in this case, it's probably okay just to slide. If black answers from the corner, then white can play some kind of an extension. This should be okay. If black pincers, white plays once here. And again, if black plays something like this, then this move and this move are miai. In this game, black actually bumped against white here and played a hane underneath. But black does have to return to the right side. So black played a hane here, white connected, and black extended. You can see that white was aiming at a cut here. So like if black had played on this side, white would have had the cut. Actually, the ladder favors white, so this is captured. For the time being, it's a ladder. Also, white can always extend here and make it a net. So now even if black fills the liberty here, now this is a net. So that's okay for white. So that's why black played the extension here. White cut anyway. This is just adding some aji. And white went into the corner. With this move, white is mostly alive. There's some aji for black to try to kill it, but it's mostly alive. And the game continued as this. White has lived in the lower right corner. If we had assumed the same variation, it would have been much more difficult for white to do that afterwards. So the fact that white got this whole exchange in the lower right before playing that Joseki in the upper right, I think white got some extra value by living in the corner with this group, with Sente, with a tempo. And also black is confined to the right side. The scope of black's territory is pretty limited. I think this is a slight advantage for white. And now I'd like to look at a slightly unusual example. White has just played the approach move here, and black has answered with a kosumi. So white took this chance to dive into the upper side with this attachment. In this game, black played a hane on top. White played here. And this is an exception to the rule, in a way, because in almost all of the cases, I've been suggesting that white should play here, allow black to capture one stone, and capture a stone here, which is probably even, but I do like the idea that white has invaded black's corner enclosure and taken the whole territory away with Sente. The real problem with this, in this board position, is that black has a very good position in the upper side here. The width of that position is very good, and that it has potential to develop into a big territory. And also because black has such a strong position on the right here, this strong position makes it a bit painful for white to try to invade that upper side. So this is a very nice side that black has. In this case, although I usually suggest that white should go into the corner like this, this is a case where I think it's okay for white to connect, and this was the game move. Now if black covers on the side, white can continue with this. And locally this is just good for white with this cutting point and this two cutting points there. Black has a weak shape on the outside. Black should probably add a stone to this, and white gets to play something on the left side. The fact that white has saved this stone, it actually gained a move by forcing black to connect there. White has a more stable life in the corner now than the ko that we were looking at before. White has this cut to look forward to. I like this for white. In the game, black covered on the 3-3 point now. And the reason I was not suggesting this variation for white is that this marked exchange, I think it's good for black. So if black had simply covered here, white would have been extending here, getting a better position towards the left. Whereas after playing once here, white is pushed down to the third line and has to crawl. But it's playable for white in this game position just because black had already spent 4 moves on the upper side. Black started with these 4 stones, building a moyo, or a framework on the upper side. In the process here, white has erased the whole framework, so all of this is gone. Black does get a lot of thickness towards the outside. So black now has potential, for instance, in this area, and maybe in the center of the board. So black also has plenty of potential, but white has taken the cash on the upper side. I'd say it's about even, but I would probably prefer to play with white. Here we are back at the local diagram. So in this diagram I was talking about this as the main sequence, the main line. And if you're just going to learn one variation from this video, this is the one I would suggest you remember. And now I would like to go into some of the other options that black has. And they are mostly at this point. When white plays the hane underneath, black does have the option to play an atari first or to play a cut. First, to look at this one, black can play here and then connect. But there is a slight difference in that now, if white plays here, it will be reverting to the variation we were just looking at in a full board position. But in this position, white can go all the way to the 3-3 point. Just because white had that solid connection there, it's just that much easier for white to get into the corner. So black will wedge, and it's usually best for white to play here. White could live with the hanging connection here, but black gets to squeeze this way. And white will probably take the one stone. You can see black has a position on both sides. For instance, black would play away at this point. And white does not really have, even if black just connects here, this kind of move is not going to gain white very much. So black could just play another move here, depending on the board position. Black has a big wall facing the outside. That was overdoing it for white, so it's probably better to look at it with this position. Even with this position, black does get a very nice wall. So by caving in the corner with white 8 here, I think white has lost too much. So I'm going to say that white should play this way and capture the cutting stone. So if black cuts on this side, white will just capture that stone and play an extension. In this variation, white does have a living shape here. And those stones in the corner, they do have the forcing move at this point. So this will help white when white invades the right side, when white invades this area. Also, white has Joseki with the attachment here. So later on in the game, if this whole area becomes black territory, in the end game white can play here and scoop out some of the corner territory. So all of those white stones, although 2 of them are captured, they are functioning in creating potential there. This idea of leaving 2 cutting points and capturing the cutting stone, it's very common idea for either side. To look at the other cut for black, white can capture this one too. And in this case, white loses the 3 stones. It might look good for black, but one must remember that this started out being a black corner enclosure, 2 black stones here. White has a living shape in the corner, and the side here is open. So it's going to be relatively difficult for black to build a nice territory on this side with the side open like that. And white has sente, so white will have a tempo. If we just look at territory, then the minimum territory is just this area, with this area for white. So the minimum amount of territory is about equal, slightly better for black. The fact that black has used 2 extra stones here means that white has got that many moves elsewhere on the board. So this should be okay for white. Coming back to this position, the other option that black has, this is the move that I suggest is the best move. And we were just looking at black playing an atari on top, in which case white gets to go all the way into the 3-3 point. More efficient for white than this position where white only can get to extend, and if white plays here now, this stone, white wishes that this stone had been at the 3-3 point, so it's less efficient for white. So the fact that white gets to play the 3-3 point here is slightly better. Now let's get into the other variation for black. That would be the cut underneath. Black can play this. It's a move that goes for territory. White will extend the one stone. Now black has to capture that white stone on the third line. First, let's look at the wrong way to do it. The wrong way would be to play an Atari from above. And this is just kind of a textbook example of how to squeeze, because this is just good for white, even if white just takes the ladder. White has got two forcing moves, or forcing moves from both sides. All of these moves were played as forcing moves in sacrificing two stones. It was very efficient for white. So to go back a few moves, connecting here, although black has fairly good position, white has a strong shape here, a living shape on the side. This is slightly better for white too. And to go a few moves further, for black's correct move in this position, that is to play an Atari from underneath. This is by far the better move than playing Atari from above. Black plays an Atari from underneath and then connects. And now white has a more difficult choice. Like, white can live underneath if white insists on doing so. That would be this move. But this would be very painful. Even if the ladder favors white, this would not be good. Even if black adds a stone to capture white in the center. White's final move there was not necessary, but, well, being forced to live like this is also very painful. This also would be good for black. So both of these variations are good for black. It's much better for white to sacrifice the two stones. I'm getting two forcing moves here. And this is about even. Locally, black might extend here. White might play some move towards the side. Usually white has a stone in the upper left corner. So it's something like this. In most cases, you have this with a board position where white has the two mark points. And let's mark a square for the black stone that is usually taking a corner. So this is the usual board position. Black did have that option of cutting here and capturing from below. So that leads to this variation, where white is going to sacrifice the two stones. To recap, I would like again to say that the main line for black is just to connect. White will have to extend, and now black can play the Atari. And it's a very interesting variation where both sides capture a stone. And there's this ko left behind. I've played it a few times in my own games. I find it leads to a very exciting game with the ko being a key point in the middle game. So that's it for my video today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please hit the like button, and please join the channel. Thank you.